Chapter 1. The Empty Kingdom. The cosmic expanse had grown quiet. Not silent. Quiet. Silence suggested peace, rest, completion. But the expanse was none of those things. It was an endless, dark ocean of drifting stone, broken bone structures, and fragments of shattered geometry. Ruins left behind from a war between powers that no longer existed. Once, colossal beings had walked here. Once, the Black Choir had sung through the lattice of worlds, their impossible harmonies feeding the engines of hell itself. Once, demons had ruled. Now there was only emptiness. And Elias. He hung suspended in the void, bound to what remained of his prison, a throne grown from twisted bone, tendons stretched like ropes across its jagged structure. The skeletal crown above him had shattered long ago, its fragments orbiting slowly like dead moons. For 10 years he had slept. 10 years of silence. 10 years of darkness pressing in from every direction. Then something inside him stirred. A slow inhale. His eyes opened. They burned like embers inside a skull that was no longer fully human. Elias drew his first breath in a decade, and the sound echoed across the dead expanse like thunder rolling through empty mountains. For a moment he did not move. He simply stared. The vast cathedral of darkness around him stretched forever, broken only by drifting ruins of ancient structures, remnants of the battle that had sealed him here. No colossal creatures moved in the distance. No towering gods of bone. No demonic armies waiting for orders. No Black Choir. No Malphas, whispering guidance. Just emptiness. A hollow kingdom. Elias slowly turned his head, his blackened horns scraping softly against the bone restraints that still held him in place. His voice, when it came, was deeper now. Older. Cracked with something that sounded almost human. His fingers curled slowly. Power pulsed through his veins, stronger than before, much stronger, but useless. What was a king without a kingdom? What was a demon without hell? His lip curled. Then the anger came, first quietly, then violently. Malphas. The name burned through his mind like poison. That ancient liar had promised him dominion, promised him power beyond imagination, promised him a throne that ruled all worlds. Instead, Elias had been used. A pawn. A tool. A replacement. His eyes burned brighter. And the choir, he growled. The Black Choir had failed him too. Their power had been vast, but not enough. Not enough to defeat Rowan. Not enough to save his empire. Not enough to stop the collapse of everything he had built. And then, there was her. Rowan. The girl who had closed the bone gate. The girl who had broken the choir. The girl who had left him trapped in a prison of bone and silence. His jaw clenched. "I trusted you," he whispered into the empty void. The words echoed endlessly into nothing. That was when the rage finally broke loose. Elias screamed. The sound tore through the expanse like a ripping storm. Power exploded from his body in waves of black fire and crimson lightning. The bone throne groaned under the pressure, ancient tendons snapping one by one. He pulled against the restraints. Bone cracked. Tendons tore. Again. Harder. The throne screamed like a dying animal as Elias forced himself forward, muscles twisting under skin that had become something darker and older than flesh. "I am not your prisoner!" With a violent roar, he ripped the throne apart. Bone shattered into thousands of splinters. The skeletal crown fragments scattered like broken stars. Elias dropped to the floating stone beneath him, breathing hard. Free. For the first time in 10 years, he was free. But the victory felt hollow. He looked around. Still nothing. No gate. No kingdom. No way out. Just the endless void. The anger returned instantly. a deep, burning fury that clawed at the inside of his chest. Elias raised his arm and slammed his fist into a drifting slab of ancient stone. It exploded into dust. He struck again. Another fragment of the expanse shattered. Again. And again. Each blow sent shockwaves rippling through the dead architecture of the void. "I built a kingdom!" he roared into the darkness. Nothing answered. He grabbed a floating piece of the old cosmic lattice, the remains of the Black Choir's framework, and tore it apart like paper. "You took everything from me." His rage became violence. He began ripping the expanse apart itself, tearing chunks of ancient geometry loose and hurling them into the abyss. Then, something flickered. A faint distortion in the air. Elias froze. Before him in the darkness, a shape shimmered. Thin, transparent, like a memory trying to exist. Slowly, the outline of a gate appeared. Tall, ribbed with bone. Familiar. The bone gate. But it wasn't real. Just an afterimage. A ghost of something that had once existed. It flickered weakly, as if reality itself still remembered the wound that gate had torn between worlds. Elias stared at it. His anger faded, replaced by something colder, something calculating. So the door remembers. A slow smile spread across his demonic face. And far away, in another world, something else had already begun. The forest had swallowed the town. Nature had moved slowly at first, creeping vines through cracked roads, weeds splitting the concrete sidewalks. But after 6 years, it had stopped creeping. It had taken over. Towering trees now grew where streets once stood. Moss covered the skeletons of buildings. Roots wrapped themselves through rusted vehicles half buried in dirt. Civilization had become a memory. Deep within the forest stood the remains of an old cement factory. The roof had partially collapsed. Rust stained the massive silos. Broken machinery lay scattered across the cracked floor like the bones of some extinct metal beast. But inside the ruined structure, life remained. Makeshift shelters built from tarps and scrap metal filled the central floor. Small cooking fires burned in metal barrels. Supplies hung from ropes strung between broken pillars. 10 teenagers lived here now. Once they had been children. The children who escaped the house. The ones Rowan had saved. Now they were older. Harder. Survivors. And Rowan had not been with them for 6 years. 3 boys moved quietly through the forest. They were lean, strong, and silent in the way people become when the world teaches them survival early. At the front walked Daniel, the oldest of the group. Sharp-eyed. Calm. He raised a hand. The others froze. Ahead of them, in a small clearing between towering trees, stood a deer. It grazed quietly, unaware. Daniel slowly lifted his bow. The weapon was handmade, carved wood reinforced with scavenged wire. The arrow rested against the string. His breathing slowed, focused, steady. The other boys watched silently. Tonight they would eat well. Venison. Real meat. Daniel pulled the bowstring back. The arrow tip lined perfectly with the deer's neck. His eyes narrowed. One more breath. Then, a shadow passed over the clearing. The deer's head snapped up. Before Daniel could react, the animal bolted into the trees. Gone. The boys groaned in frustration. "Damn it," one muttered. Daniel lowered the bow slowly, but he wasn't looking at where the deer had gone. He was looking up. The others followed his gaze. Something had flown overhead. Something big. The branches above still swayed slightly. One of the boys swallowed. "Did you see it?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah. How big?" He hesitated, then answered quietly. "Bigger than a person." None of them spoke for a while. Then they turned and began walking back toward the factory. The forest felt different now. Heavier, And as they walked, they all had the same uncomfortable feeling, like something above the trees was watching them. The old cement factory had become a home. Not a comfortable one, but a safe one. The 10 teenagers gathered around the fire as the hunters returned. When Daniel explained what had happened in the forest, the reaction spread through the group like cold water. "A bird?" someone suggested. "No bird that big," another replied. "Maybe a vulture." Daniel shook his head. "No." His voice was quiet. Wings sounded heavier than that. That was when the unease settled into the room. For the next 3 days, none of them could shake the feeling. The strange sensation that something was nearby, watching, waiting. Every snapped twig made them turn. Every movement in the trees made their hearts jump. And far above the forest, something with massive wings circled silently through the clouds, watching the survivors below. Chapter 2. The Thing That Came from the Sky. The nights had grown colder. Inside the broken cement factory, the wind whispered through cracked walls and hollow machinery, carrying with it the endless rustling of the forest that had devoured the town years ago. The fire burned low in its metal barrel. Most of the teenagers were asleep, curled beneath blankets made from stitched scraps and old tarps. But Lena sat awake. She stared into the fire. Her fingers traced absent patterns through the dust on the concrete floor. The others thought she was just tired, but she wasn't. She was remembering. The past had been creeping into her mind more often lately, like old ghosts walking through the ruins of her thoughts. And tonight, the memories refused to stay buried. She looked toward the dark corners of the factory where the others slept. 10 of them now. Once there had been 12. And once, there had been Rowan. Lena swallowed hard. "I miss her," she whispered quietly to herself. Across the room, Daniel stirred slightly. "Who?" he muttered sleepily. Lena didn't answer at first. She just stared into the fire. "Rowan," she said finally. The name hung in the air like a fragile thing. A few of the others shifted awake. Nobody spoke. Rowan had become something strange in their memories. Not quite real. Not quite legend. The girl who had taught them how to survive. The girl who had saved them from the house. The girl who had burned with light. And the girl who had never come back. Daniel sat up slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I miss her too." Lena nodded. But Rowan wasn't the only ghost walking through her thoughts tonight. "There were 12 of us," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you remember that?" Everyone did. But nobody liked to talk about it. 2 years ago, the forest had taken 2 more. The fire crackled softly as Lena's mind drifted back to that day. The forest had been bright that morning. Warm sunlight filtered through the leaves. The world had felt safe. Or safe enough. Mary and Clara had gone out to gather berries. They'd done it 100 times before. Everyone knew the berry patches that grew near the creek. It was supposed to be an easy trip. Just a quick walk. Just a basket of food. But the forest had been quiet that day. Too quiet. Clara noticed it first. "No birds," she had whispered. Mary shrugged. "Probably just hiding." But then the growl came. Low, deep, close. They turned slowly. The wolves stepped out from the trees. 5 of them. Thin. Hungry. Their yellow eyes locked onto the girls. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mary grabbed Clara's arm. "Run!" They bolted through the forest. Branches whipped their faces, and their baskets spilled berries behind them. But the wolves were faster. Clara screamed as one slammed into her from the side. She fell hard. Mary turned back. "Clara!" The wolves descended instantly. Teeth, fur, blood. Clara's screams tore through the forest as the wolves dragged her away, her fingers clawing at the dirt. "Mary!" The sound of her voice haunted Lena even now. Mary ran. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until the wolves were gone, but they had left her with something worse. The bite on her leg. At first it seemed small, just a wound. Rowan would have known what to do, but Rowan wasn't there anymore. They cleaned the bite, wrapped it, did their best, but the infection came quickly. By the second day, Mary was burning with fever. By the third day, she couldn't move. By the fourth, she stopped breathing. Back in the present, Lena wiped her eyes. The others sat silently around the fire. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I remember." No one spoke for a long moment. Then, a shadow passed over the factory. The fire flickered violently. Everyone looked up. Something huge moved across the broken ceiling above them. The air filled with the deep whomp, whomp, whomp of enormous wings. The teenagers scrambled to their feet. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered. Another shadow swept across the ruined floor. Closer this time. Daniel grabbed his bow. "Get ready." 3 of the boys moved beside him. Arrows knocked. The wing beats grew louder, circling, watching. The creature moved through the open sky above the factory ruins like a predator studying prey. The teenagers stood frozen in the center of the structure, every muscle tense. Then, the wings stopped. A heavy thud echoed through the factory. The creature had landed. Slowly, they turned. At the far end of the broken structure stood one of the old cement pillars, half collapsed, jagged. Perched on top of it was a figure, tall, still, watching them. 2 eyes burned in the darkness, glowing like embers. The creature unfolded slowly. Massive black wings stretched outward. A shape stepped forward into the dim firelight. It was humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, too sharp. Its skin looked like dark stone carved into muscle and bone. 2 curved horns rose from its skull, and its eyes burned with the deep red glow of living fire. The teenagers staggered backward. "What is that?" someone whispered. Daniel raised his bow. The others followed. 3 arrows aimed directly at the creature. The demon smiled. A slow, wide, terrifying grin. "Well," the creature said calmly. Its voice echoed through the factory like distant thunder. "That's not very friendly." The boys released their arrows. 3 shafts flew upward, straight toward the demon's chest. The creature didn't move. It simply raised one hand and snapped its fingers. The arrows turned to ash in midair. They disintegrated before reaching him. The teenagers froze. Fear crashed over them like a tidal wave. The demon's glowing eyes moved slowly across their faces, studying them, listening to their hearts, feeling their thoughts. And then he felt it, deep inside them. Love, memory, pain, all connected to one name. Rowan. The demon's smile faded slightly. "Interesting," he murmured. His wings folded behind him. Then he jumped. He landed in the center of the factory with a bone-rattling impact. Dust exploded outward across the floor. The teenagers scrambled backward. None of them dared draw another arrow. The demon stood slowly, up close. He was even more terrifying. Nearly 8 feet tall. Wings like shadows, eyes like burning coals. He tilted his head slightly. "Tell me something," he said softly. His voice carried a strange calmness, almost curiosity. "Where is Rowan?" The teenagers looked at each other. None of them spoke. Then Daniel stepped forward. His legs trembled, but he didn't run. The demon watched him carefully. "You know her," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. The demon's grin returned slightly. "Oh," he said. "I know Rowan." Daniel swallowed. Then he spoke the words that had lived in all their hearts for years. "She's dead." For the first time, the demon's expression changed. The fire in his eyes flickered slightly. "Dead?" he repeated quietly. Daniel nodded. And slowly, carefully, he began to tell the story. About the house. About the living walls. About the food. About the fire. About the night Rowan had saved them. And the night the house burned with her inside it. The demon listened without interrupting. His expression grew darker with every word. When Daniel finished, silence filled the factory. The demon stood motionless, thinking, processing. Then finally, he spoke. "Rowan," his voice was quieter now, strangely distant, "is not dead." The teenagers stared at him, confused, terrified. "How would you know?" Daniel demanded. The demon looked towards the distant forest, far beyond the trees, far beyond the ruins, towards something none of them could see. "Because," he said softly, "something with her face is still alive. And somewhere deep in the forest, beneath the earth, inside a towering crystal structure, a heart-shaped chamber pulsed slowly, and the woman growing inside it opened her eyes." Chapter 3. The Breaking of the Heart. The forest had gone quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind seemed hesitant to move through the branches. High above the dark canopy, a vast shadow moved across the sky. Massive wings beat slowly against the night. Each powerful stroke carried Elias farther from the abandoned cement factory and deeper into the endless wilderness that had swallowed the old town years ago. In his clawed hand struggled the eldest of the teenagers. "Daniel!" The boy kicked and twisted violently, trying to pry Elias's iron grip away from his chest. It was useless. Elias's strength was monstrous. To him, Daniel weighed little more than a bird. The Demon King's glowing eyes scanned the horizon below. Searching? Feeling. The moment he had heard the story of the house, something ancient inside him had stirred. A faint pulse. A distant signal. Like a heartbeat buried beneath miles of earth. Now he followed it. And soon, he saw it. The forest opened into a wide clearing. At its center stood something impossibly, a tower of crystal. It rose from the earth like a frozen spear of light, its surface shimmering with faint internal radiance. Veins of soft gold energy pulsed through its structure like slow-moving lightning. At the tower's core, visible through its translucent surface, floated a massive crystalline heart. Inside the heart, a shape. Human. Female. Sleeping. Elias landed heavily at the base of the structure. The ground cracked beneath his weight. Daniel fell to the dirt beside him, gasping as he tried to crawl away, but Elias barely noticed him. His attention was locked onto the crystal heart. The demon stepped forward slowly. The glow from the structure reflected across his dark, jagged skin. His burning eyes narrowed. "Rowan," he said quietly. Inside the heart, the figure remained motionless. Elias's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Well," he muttered, "this saves me the trouble of searching." His wings spread wide. Dark energy gathered around his claws. He raised his hand and slammed it against the crystal tower. A violent blast of demonic power erupted outward. The clearing exploded with force. Trees bent violently. Leaves tore from branches. The ground trembled beneath the impact. But the crystal did not move. Not even a scratch appeared on its surface. Elias frowned. He raised both hands this time. Black lightning erupted from his palms and slammed into the tower with catastrophic force. The blast shook the entire forest. Birds fled into the night. The ground cracked. Dust filled the air. When the smoke cleared, The crystal remained untouched, not even a hairline fracture. Elias stared at it. Confusion flickered across his face. He stepped closer, pressed one claw against the smooth surface. The structure hummed faintly beneath his touch. Warm, alive, protected. His eyes narrowed slowly. Immune, he whispered. The realization spread through his mind like poison. This thing, whatever had created it, had been designed specifically to resist him. A growl escaped his throat. Elias turned slowly. His burning eyes landed on the boy crawling desperately through the dirt. Daniel froze. The Demon King stared at him. And then, Elias smiled again. But this time the smile held something colder, something thoughtful. Because now he understood something else. He had felt it earlier. When he first looked into their minds, the connection. The love. The memories. These children were tied to Rowan, connected to her. And if the crystal was immune to him, perhaps she wasn't. Elias bent down and grabbed Daniel by the throat. The boy struggled violently, kicking and clawing at the demon's arm. Elias lifted him easily into the air. You, Elias said quietly. You know Rowan better than the others. Daniel glared at him despite the terror in his eyes. Go to hell, Elias chuckled softly. My dear boy, he said. I've already been there. His wings unfolded. And a moment later, they were gone. Deep beneath the forest lay an old cavern. Wet. Cold. The air smelled of stone and decay. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing softly through the darkness. Daniel hung suspended in the center of the chamber. Black tendrils of living shadow wrapped around his arms, legs, and chest, binding him in place like dark chains. Elias stood before him, watching, studying. The boy's breathing was ragged now. Fear had finally begun to crack his composure. Let me go, Daniel demanded. Elias tilted his head slightly. Why? Daniel glared at him. Because Rowan would kill you for this. The demon's eyes flickered. Then he laughed. A deep, hollow sound that filled the cave. Rowan is sleeping, Elias said calmly. And you? He stepped closer. Are going to wake her up. Daniel frowned. What? Elias raised one claw slowly. Pain, the Demon King said softly, is a very powerful signal. The claw sliced across Daniel's chest. The boy screamed. Blood ran down his shirt as the wound split open. Elias watched carefully, studying the reaction. The emotional spike, the mental shockwave. He leaned closer. And now, he whispered, let's see how much signal you can produce. The tendrils tightened, and the torture began. Elias did not torture like a human. Humans understood pain in simple ways. Cutting, burning, breaking bones. But Elias had once been a boy who commanded the Black Choir. He understood something far deeper. He attacked the mind. Daniel's body remained suspended in the cave. But inside his head, reality shattered. Suddenly the boy was standing in an endless void. His skin began to peel away. Muscle tore from bone. Flesh dissolved into nothing. He screamed as his skeleton collapsed into dust. And then, he was whole again. The process began again, and again, and again. Every nerve ending screaming. Every memory shattered by waves of unimaginable agony. Outside the hallucination, Elias watched calmly. Each psychic strike sent shockwaves through the connection Daniel shared with Rowan. Each scream echoed across invisible threads binding them together. Still, the boy resisted. 6 years in the forest had hardened him. Rowan had taught him to endure, but Elias was patient. Hours passed, then longer. The cave echoed with Daniel's ragged breathing. His voice had grown hoarse from screaming. Blood covered the floor beneath him. Even Elias began to feel faint satisfaction. Until something changed. A tremor passed through the cave. Elias stopped. The air vibrated with a strange frequency. He turned his head slowly. Far away, something had awakened. In the forest clearing, the crystal tower pulsed violently. Golden light surged through its veins. Inside the heart, the sleeping figure moved. Daniel's final scream echoed through Rowan's mind. Her eyes snapped open. Pain flooded her thoughts. Daniel's pain. Her friend's fear. Elias. Rage exploded inside her chest. The crystal heart cracked. A blinding surge of radiant Lumanarch energy erupted outward. The tower shattered in a storm of glowing fragments. Light burst across the sky like a second sunrise. And from the explosion, a figure launched forward like a comet. Wings of pure radiant energy unfolded behind her. Her body blazed with brilliant golden light. Her eyes burned with the ancient power of the Lumanarches. Rowan was awake, and she knew exactly where Elias was. The sky thundered as she shot across the forest like a living star. Straight toward the cave, straight toward the Demon King, straight toward the boy screaming in the darkness. Inside the cavern, Elias slowly smiled. He had felt her awakening. He had felt her power surge across the land at last. The real fight could begin. He looked up toward the cave entrance. Golden light began to flood the darkness. The cave trembled as Rowan descended like divine fury. Elias spread his wings. His burning eyes gleamed with excitement. "Hello, Rowan," he whispered. And the war between them began again. Chapter 4. Light in the Deep. The cave exploded with light. It didn't arrive quietly. It tore into the cavern like a bolt from heaven. Stone walls cracked open with thunderous force. Dust and rock burst outward as a column of blinding white radiance slammed down from above. The shadow tendrils recoiled instantly. They writhed and shrank back like worms under fire. Daniel blinked through the glare, barely able to see. A figure descended slowly through the radiant storm. At first he thought it was an angel. Light flowed around her like living silk, illuminating the cave in warm gold and fierce white. Her hair moved in a silent wind that did not exist, strands glowing faintly like threads of sunlight. Then the light softened, and Daniel saw her face. Older, stronger, but unmistakable. "Rowan," he croaked. She landed gently on the stone floor. The cavern trembled from the impact of power contained inside a human frame. Rowan Hale stood upright and looked around the cave. Her eyes settled on Daniel. The boy hung limp in the dying shadow tendrils. For a moment, something fierce and protective flashed across her face. Then she raised her hand. A beam of pure Lumanarch energy erupted from her palm. It struck the tendrils with a sound like tearing metal. The black strands disintegrated instantly, unraveling into drifting ash. Daniel dropped. Rowan stepped forward and caught him before he struck the ground. His body was trembling violently. "You're safe now," she whispered. Soft light spread from her hands, flowing into his wounds. Burn marks faded, torn skin slowly closed. The damage to his mind quieted as warmth flooded through his thoughts. Daniel's breathing steadied. Behind them, something moved. Rowan felt it instantly. She turned. Elias stood across the cavern. He had not attacked. He had not moved. He simply watched her. For the first time in 10 years, their eyes met. Elias had changed. The boy Rowan remembered was gone. In his place stood something ancient and terrible. His skin was dark and cracked with faint molten veins beneath the surface. 2 horns curved from his skull like blackened ivory. His wings stretched wider than the cavern walls, each slow movement stirring dust and loose stones. And his eyes burned like dying suns. Rowan studied him carefully, not with fear, but with quiet understanding. "You survived," Elias said. His voice was deeper now, two tones layered together like a human voice echoing through something older. Rowan didn't answer. She simply raised her hand. A spear of radiant lightning tore across the cavern. It struck Elias full in the chest. The explosion blasted him backward through solid rock. Stone shattered outward as his body smashed into the cave wall with crushing force. Dust filled the air. Daniel shielded his face. Rowan stepped forward slowly. The rubble shifted. Then Elias emerged from the broken stone. He rolled his shoulders as if shaking off a mild inconvenience. A low chuckle escaped him. "Well," he said, "that answers that." His wings snapped open. Dark energy surged through the cavern. And the fight began. Rowan moved first. Light burst from her hands in brilliant arcs, carving glowing scars into the cave walls. Elias answered with waves of burning shadow that slammed against her power like colliding storms. The cavern could not contain them. Each clash cracked the stone further. Reality itself began to strain. The ceiling split open as their powers collided. Through the fracture, the night sky flickered into view, though the stars seemed wrong somehow. Twisted, too distant. Elias hurled a wave of demonic fire. Rowan cut through it with a blade of pure light. The shockwave blasted outward. Outside the cave, the trees bent violently. Birds dropped dead from the sky as the air itself screamed under the pressure of their battle. Daniel watched in terrified awe. This wasn't a fight between people. This was something far larger. Light and darkness collided again. And again. And again. Each impact tore small wounds in the fabric of reality. Through one of those wounds, something moved. A deeper darkness. Vast. Watching. Rowan saw it first. Her attack faltered. "Elias," she shouted. But he was lost in the battle. 10 years of silence. 10 years of rage. 10 years trapped in the endless void. Every strike he delivered carried the weight of that loneliness. "Stop," Rowan cried. Another collision erupted. Reality split wider. This time, both of them saw what lay beyond. Not hell. Not the cosmic expanse. Something deeper. Something vast enough to swallow worlds. Something that had just noticed them. Elias froze. For the first time since the battle began, uncertainty crossed his face. The tear in reality pulsed like an open wound. A low, distant sound echoed from the darkness beyond it. Elias's instincts screamed danger. If they kept fighting, the world would break. And whatever lived beyond that tear might come through. He lowered his hands slowly. Rowan stood ready for another attack, light blazing around her. But Elias didn't strike. He studied her for a long moment. "You've grown stronger," he said quietly. Then his wings unfolded. With a powerful surge, he launched upward through the shattered ceiling, bursting into the night sky beyond. The storm clouds swallowed him instantly. Rowan watched him disappear. She could chase him. Her power was strong enough now, but she didn't move. The wound in reality slowly began knitting itself closed. Another fight like that would tear it open again. Rowan exhaled slowly. Then she knelt beside Daniel. Gentle light flowed from her hands once more. Outside, the forest slowly settled back into uneasy silence. But far away, thunder rolled across the sky, and somewhere within that storm, Elias was watching. Waiting. For several long seconds, Rowan remained kneeling beside Daniel, staring at the hole in the cave ceiling where Elias had vanished. Cold night air drifted down through the broken stone. The wind carried the smell of pine trees and wet earth, but beneath it lingered something else, something faint and metallic. The scent of burned reality. Rowan closed her eyes. The power inside her still roared like a storm barely contained beneath skin and bone. The return of Elias had awakened something violent in that power, something ancient that had been sleeping since the fall of the house. Her hands trembled slightly. Daniel stirred beside her. "Rowan?" His voice was hoarse and fragile. She opened her eyes immediately and looked down at him. The boy had grown. The last time she had seen any of them, they were children, frightened and barely surviving. Now Daniel's face was leaner, his features hardened by years of hunger, cold nights, and responsibility. But his eyes were the same, still stubborn, still alive. Rowan placed a hand gently against his shoulder. Soft light flowed through him again, knitting the last fractures in his body and quieting the lingering psychic wounds Elias had carved into his mind. "You're safe now," she said quietly. Daniel swallowed hard. He looked up at the broken cave ceiling, then back at her. Is it gone?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood slowly and walked toward the shattered cave wall where Elias had struck earlier. Deep cracks radiated through the stone like spiderweb fractures in glass. But that wasn't what caught her attention. The air itself looked wrong. Thin distortions shimmered faintly where their powers had collided. Invisible seams stretched through the cavern like scars in the fabric of the world. Rowan raised her hand cautiously. Her fingers brushed one of the distortions. Reality rippled. For a brief second, she saw something beyond the cave. Not the forest, not the sky, something else. An endless depth filled with slow-moving shadows. Watching. Rowan pulled her hand back instantly. Her expression hardened. Daniel struggled to his feet behind her. "What is it?" he asked. Rowan turned toward him, her voice calm but tight. "If Elias and I keep fighting like that," she said quietly, "we won't just destroy each other." She looked up at the fractured ceiling again. "We'll tear the world open." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Outside, thunder rumbled across the distant forest. Rowan walked back towards him. "How many of you are left?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. 10. Rowan closed her eyes briefly. 2 gone. She already knew the answer before asking. "Wolves," Daniel said softly. Rowan nodded once. The forest had never been forgiving. She rested a hand on his shoulder again. "You did well," she said. Daniel looked at her, surprised. "We tried," he said quietly. Rowan studied him for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been avoiding. "How long has Elias been awake?" Daniel shook his head. "We don't know." "He showed up today?" Daniel nodded. "And he already knew about you." Rowan looked down at the cave floor. That meant something important. Elias had been searching, but not for long. If he had been awake for weeks or months, the forest would already be burning. The fact that he was hunting blindly meant he had only recently awakened, which meant something else. He was still learning his limits. Daniel noticed the tension in her posture. "Are we safe?" he asked quietly. Rowan looked toward the cave opening again. The forest beyond was silent. Too silent. "Not yet," she said. Daniel felt his stomach sink. Rowan began pacing slowly through the cavern, studying the fractures in the stone and the shimmering distortions in the air. Each one pulsed faintly with unstable energy. The fight had been too violent, too powerful. Even now, the wounds in reality hadn't fully closed. Daniel watched her carefully. "You let him go," he said. Rowan stopped walking. "Yes." "Why?" Rowan looked up at the sky through the broken ceiling. The clouds above churned slowly like a brewing storm. "Because he realized something." Daniel waited. Rowan spoke quietly. "He realized this fight will kill everything." She turned back toward Daniel. "And that includes him." Daniel frowned. You think he cares about that? Rowan's expression was unreadable. No, she said. He cares about winning. Another distant rumble of thunder rolled across the forest. Rowan walked toward the cave entrance now. The night air felt cold against her skin, but the power inside her burned hotter with every passing second. Elias was still out there, and now he knew she was alive. Daniel followed her cautiously. What happens now? Rowan stood at the mouth of the cave, staring out at the dark forest. For a moment she said nothing. Then she spoke quietly. Now he runs. Daniel blinked. Runs? Rowan nodded. He won't face me again until he understands what we almost did tonight. She looked back towards the shattered cavern behind them. The next fight will be worse. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. Rowan turned back toward the forest. We need to move the others. Back to the quarry? Yes. Why? Rowan's eyes scanned the tree line carefully. Because Elias was clever, cruel, patient, and now he knew something important. The children loved Rowan. That connection had already awakened her once, and Elias would use it again. Rowan's voice grew quieter. Because he's not done hunting. Daniel followed her gaze into the forest. The trees stood motionless in the windless night. But far above them, something moved inside the storm clouds. Rowan felt it instantly. A distant pulse of demonic energy rippled through the sky. Elias. Watching. Waiting. Studying his enemy. Rowan exhaled slowly. Come on, she said. Daniel stepped beside her. Together they walked out of the cave and into the forest. Behind them, the fractures in reality slowly began sealing themselves shut. But one tiny distortion remained. High in the cavern's ceiling. It pulsed faintly. And somewhere beyond that thin wound in the universe, something enormous stirred in the darkness. Something ancient had noticed the fight. And it was beginning to wake. Chapter 5. The Quarry Remembers. The road to the old cement factory had long since vanished beneath weeds and cracked earth. Daniel walked ahead with a lantern fashioned from an old battery and a cracked headlamp lens. The dim yellow beams swayed with every step, dragging long skeletal shadows across the broken concrete. Rowan followed behind him. She moved quietly, almost ghost-like, her cloak brushing against the brittle grass. The wind carried the smell of dust and rusted metal, the scent of a world that had stopped living years ago. Ahead, the factory rose from the darkness, or what was left of it. The massive silos leaned at unnatural angles, like tired giants trying to remain standing. The conveyor towers creaked softly in the wind, metal bones groaning against one another. Rowan stopped. Her breath caught. You lived here, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Wasn't much choice. For a moment, neither of them moved. The factory loomed above them like a corpse that refused to lie down. Then Daniel lifted the lantern higher and called out, "We're back!" Silence answered. Then, footsteps. Quick ones. The rusted doors of the loading bay slammed open, and several figures burst out into the pale lantern light. "Daniel? Is that you?" They stopped when they saw the second silhouette standing behind him. A tall girl. Dark hair whipping in the wind. Eyes glowing faintly with something ancient. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a boy stepped forward slowly. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Rowan. Rowan felt the world tilt. The boy was taller now, broader in the shoulders, older. But she recognized him instantly. Micah. He stared at her like he was looking at a ghost. Then suddenly, he was running, and the others followed. The moment they reached her, everything broke. Hands grabbing her arms, shoulders. Someone nearly tackled her in a hug. "You're alive?" "Rowan," we thought. "Oh my God, it's really you." Tears came fast. Messy. Uncontrolled. 10 years of grief breaking open in seconds. Lena buried her face in Rowan's shoulder and sobbed. "You disappeared. We thought you were gone forever." Rowan hugged her tightly. I almost was. Daniel stepped back quietly, letting the moment belong to them. The wind whispered through the empty factory windows. For the first time in years, the abandoned place felt alive. Later, they gathered around a small fire inside what used to be the factory's maintenance room. Old metal chairs had been dragged into a loose circle. The flames painted the walls with slow-moving shadows. Rowan sat among them and told them everything. They listened in stunned silence. But when she began describing the cosmic expanse, the air in the room seemed to grow colder. "The sky wasn't a sky anymore," Rowan said quietly. "It was everything." She stared into the fire as she spoke. Stars moved like living things. Space folded in on itself like breathing lungs. And Elias. Her voice hardened. He wasn't human there. Micah leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Rowan swallowed. "He became something else." The fire crackled softly. A shape made of shadow and light, like the universe was trying to remember what he used to be. No one spoke. Then Lena whispered, "And you fought him?" Rowan nodded slowly. For a moment, I thought I was going to die. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held them near the warmth of the flames. But then I felt it. She looked up at them. The Lumanarch light. The name hung in the air like a sacred word. "What did it feel like?" Daniel asked quietly. Rowan closed her eyes. "Like the first sunrise ever made." The room fell silent again. Outside, the wind howled softly through the factory ruins. Finally, Micah spoke again. "So Elias knows you're here now?" Rowan nodded. "Yes." Daniel sighed and rubbed his face. "Well, that settles it." He looked around the room. "We move." No one argued. They left before dawn. The group travelled in silence through the skeleton of what had once been their town. Buildings collapsed inward like hollow teeth. Street signs bent toward the ground. Rusting cars rested where people had abandoned them years ago. Rowan walked beside Lena. "I barely recognize it," Rowan said softly. Lena gave a sad smile. "None of us do." They passed the old school. Its windows were shattered. The playground swings moved slowly in the wind. Rowan felt a chill crawl down her spine. "Do you remember when Micah broke his arm falling off that slide?" Lena asked. Rowan laughed quietly. He swore the slide attacked him. Up ahead, Micah turned around. "I heard that." For a moment, the group actually smiled. The sound of laughter felt strange in the ruined streets, but it felt good. By midday, they reached the quarry. The earth dropped away into a massive bowl of pale stone and winding paths. Their old home. The camp still existed. Barely. Some of the old shelters had collapsed, but the stone overhang where they once slept still stood strong against the quarry wall. Daniel stepped forward slowly. "Well," he said. "Looks like the old place waited for us." Rowan walked to the edge and looked out across the quarry. Memories flooded her mind. Children laughing. Campfires burning. Stories whispered late into the night. She felt tears sting her eyes again. "We're really back." Behind her, Micah began unpacking supplies. Lena started rebuilding the fire pit. The others gathered wood and tarps. Life slowly returned to the abandoned place. But Rowan remained standing at the edge of the quarry, watching the horizon, somewhere far beyond the ruined town. Her thoughts drift towards Elias. "Where are you?" she said quietly under her breath. The wind whispered through the broken earth like a warning. Chapter 6. the world beyond the rift. Night settled over the quarry like a slow closing hand. The teenagers slept beneath the old stone overhang, their campfire long since burned down to a dim red glow. Wind moved through the broken quarry paths, whispering through the pale rock like distant voices. Rowan couldn't sleep. She stood at the mouth of the cave, the place where the rift still existed. It was small, barely wider than a human hand, but the darkness inside it was wrong. It didn't reflect light. It drank it. Rowan felt the hairs on her arms rise. Something behind that slit in reality was awake, watching, waiting. Then, the world changed. Far beyond Rowan's reality, beyond stars, beyond time, beyond the thin veil that separated universes. Something ancient opened its eyes. The realm beyond the rifts had no sky, no ground, no shape that mortal minds could easily understand. It was an ocean of shifting darkness, older than existence itself. A place where dead stars drifted like bones and gravity bent in impossible spirals. This was the outer deep, a place forgotten by creation, but not empty. Something vast moved within the darkness, not walking, not flying, simply being. Its body was the size of continents, though the word body hardly applied. It was a living storm of tendrils, shifting geometry, and enormous burning eyes that opened and closed across its surface like galaxies blinking awake. When it spoke, the void trembled. Its voice was not sound. It was pressure, thought, madness. The veil weakens. Across the abyss, countless smaller creatures writhed. Pale things that resembled broken shadows, drawn towards their master like insects toward a dying sun. Creation decays. Its vast consciousness pushed outward, touching the thin membrane between worlds. The rifts, tiny wounds in reality, doorways. Soon, a memory surfaced in the creature's ancient mind, our world. Blue. Alive. Filled with fragile minds and fragile flesh. A garden ripe for devouring. But something had interfered. A spark of defiance. A light. The creature's many eyes narrowed with burning hatred. The Lumanarch light. The last weapon of the Creator. But even that light had grown weak. Scattered. Broken. Except for one. The creature felt her again. Rowan. Its thoughts slithered across the dimensions toward the tiny open rift in the quarry cave. Yes. Its voice echoed through the abyss like a slow thunder. Open the rift, child of light. Break the chains of your world, and I shall devour the stars. Back in the cave, Rowan collapsed to her knees. Her head pounded with sudden pain. The rift pulsed. Darkness spilled from it like smoke. Then, the light inside Rowan reacted. Her chest burned. A warm golden glow spread beneath her skin, pushing against the darkness like sunrise breaking through a storm. The rift began shaking violently. The cave trembled. Rowan gasped. What is happening? The light exploded outward, not violently, but beautifully. Golden energy filled the cave like sunlight pouring through water. The darkness from the rift recoiled. And from within the light, a figure appeared. Tall, radiant, ancient beyond comprehension. It looked vaguely human, but perfection radiated from every inch of its being. Its skin shimmered like living starlight, and its eyes contained entire galaxies of golden flame. Rowan stared in stunned silence. Who are you? The being smiled softly. Its voice was calm, gentle, but powerful enough to shake the bones of the universe. I am the one who lit the first dawn, the cave filled with warmth, the one who gave light to the void. The being stepped closer. My name is Aurelian, the first luminary. Rowan's heart pounded. The creator of the Lumanarch light? Aurelian nodded. Yes. Rowan struggled to understand what she was seeing. You're a god. The ancient being tilted his head slightly. A word your kind uses. Behind them, the rift hissed angrily, as if the darkness inside it hated the presence of this radiant figure. Rowan pointed at it. That thing, the creature on the other side. What is it? Aurelian's expression darkened. Older than your universe. The devourer of dying realities. The god of madness. Rowan felt cold. It wants to come here. Yes. And Elias, Rowan whispered. He's helping it. Aurelian sighed softly. Elias is not your enemy. Rowan snapped her head up. What? He is a prisoner. Images flashed through the air between them. Visions made of light. Rowan saw Elias, but not as he was now. She saw a younger version of him. Human. Kind. Afraid. Then darkness wrapped around him like chains. Something ancient and cruel burrowed into his soul. A demonic force feeding on his pain and power. Rowan's voice trembled. He's possessed? Bound, Aurelian corrected gently. The creature beyond the rifts cannot cross into your world without a herald. Elias was chosen. Rowan's stomach twisted. So what do I do? Aurelian looked directly into her eyes. You must free him. Rowan laughed bitterly. He tried to kill me. Yes. But the boy he once was still exists beneath the chains. Rowan shook her head. That's impossible. Aurelian's golden eyes softened. Freedom is never born from destruction. It is born from union. Rowan frowned. Union? The ancient god's voice became quieter, more intimate. The chains binding Elias are forged from hatred and isolation. They can only be broken by their opposite. Rowan's breath caught. Love? Aurelian said nothing, but his silence answered the question. Rowan stared at the ground. How do I even begin to save someone like him? The first luminary stepped back into the golden light. You already have. Rowan looked up. What? You chose not to destroy him when you had the chance. The light in the cave slowly began fading. Aurelian's form shimmered like sunrise dissolving into morning. One day soon, Rowan, his voice echoed gently through the stone, you will stand before Elias again. And in that moment, the fate of your world will be decided. The rift snapped violently behind her. The darkness surged once more, but the golden light inside Rowan burned brighter than ever. Aurelian's final words whispered through the cave. Remember, child of the Lumanarch. Even the darkest soul can still remember the sun. Then the light vanished. Rowan was alone again, except for the tiny rift, still waiting, still watching, and far beyond the veil of reality, the god of madness was smiling. Chapter 7. Fractures of the Mind. The quarry slept beneath a velvet sky, stars twinkling faintly, though Rowan could sense that something darker lingered above them, just out of sight. The fire in the center of their makeshift camp flickered, casting long shadows across the teenagers' faces. They were all tired from the day's work, repairing shelters, hunting for food, talking in hushed voices about the strange pulsing rift in the cave. Rowan sat apart from the group, her knees drawn to her chest. Daniel sat beside her quietly as he always did, letting her thoughts spill without interruption. She began, her voice low and tremulous. This task, saving Elias, it may be impossible. Daniel's gaze was steady. Impossible. You've already done what no one else could. You fought him, you held the Lumanarch light. You survived the house, the black choir. What makes this different? Rowan's eyes were haunted, fixed on a crack in the stone below the firelight. It's different because he's not the boy we knew. He's fully demon now. He's alone in the void, and the god of madness, it whispers to him, feeds on him. I don't know if the boy inside him even exists anymore, and even if he does, what if I can't reach him? Daniel hesitated, then laid a hand over hers. Rowan, you've always found a way before. You're not alone, the light is with you. She let out a shaky breath but didn't look at him. I want to believe that, Daniel, I do. But what if I fail him? It was then that the boy, one of the youngest of the group, Theo, shivered, his hands gripping a broken piece of wood like a talisman. Rowan noticed immediately the flicker in his eyes, the twitch in his hands, the subtle shift in his breathing. Rowan, Daniel said softly, look at him. Rowan turned. Theo's pupils had darkened unnaturally. A faint whispering seemed to curl in her ears, carrying with it a malice that didn't belong to any human being. The god of madness had begun its work. Rowan stood and approached him carefully, her own Lumanarch light glowing faintly in the dark. She knelt, keeping her hands low and calm. Theo, she said gently, you're safe. It's okay. You're not alone. Listen to my voice. I'm here with you. We're here with you. Daniel stepped forward, reinforcing her words. Theo, the world isn't what it's trying to make you believe. You're stronger than this. You've survived worse. Focus on us. Focus on your breathing. 1, 2, 3. The whispers recoiled slightly like a dark mist retreating from sunlight. Theo's eyes blinked rapidly and his body sagged, exhausted but still human. See, Rowan whispered. You're okay. For now. For a day or two, Theo seemed himself again. He laughed at Micah's clumsy attempts at trap setting, argued with Daniel over rations, and even helped carry water from the stream. But Rowan felt it lurking. The shadow at the edge of his mind had not vanished. It had only been delayed. On the third night, the whispers returned. Louder, insistent, clawing at his sanity. Rowan awoke to a strange silence. The camp was unnervingly still. Daniel was slumped over the fire, asleep. The other teens were restless in their sleeping bags. But Theo, he was gone. Rowan's stomach dropped. The faint scent of ozone, twisted metal, and rot lingered in the air. She closed her eyes and reached out with the Lumanarch light. The rift in the cave pulsed in response, a faint golden shimmer against the obsidian darkness. Rowan's heart clenched. Theo was drawn to it. She ran toward the cave, Daniel close behind, her light blazing like a beacon in the night. Inside the rift, the air was thick and heavy. Rowan could hear the whispers twisting in impossible patterns, forming words that shouldn't exist. And then she saw him, or what was left. Theo's body was contorting, stretching, skin rippling unnaturally. His fingers elongated into clawed appendages, his legs twisted, his face elongating and stretching like clay. Rowan! His voice cracked and warped. I can't stop it. The god of madness spoke then, directly into Rowan's mind, its voice a grinding infinite echo. This one is mine, body, mind, and soul. You cannot take him. Rowan's chest tightened. She reached out, but her light barely touched the twisting figure before it recoiled. She felt her stomach knot. I can't save him, she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. I can't. Not him too. The rift pulsed, and in the corner of her vision she saw fragments of his humanity flicker. A memory of his laughter, the spark of the boy she knew before the madness. But it was fleeting. Rowan staggered out of the cave, her light dimmed but still glowing faintly. Daniel caught her arm, steadying her. He's gone, she said softly, her voice breaking. The rift, it's taken him. He's lost. Daniel shook his head, silent. Words seemed inadequate. Rowan sank to the ground near the remnants of their campfire. That night, as the teenagers slept under the faint starlight, Rowan sat alone, staring at the broken horizon. Memories swirled in her mind. The days before the apocalypse, before the house, before the black choir. Days when Elias was still human, when laughter and friendship filled the ruins of the world. Rowan pressed a hand to her chest. Can I really save him? She whispered into the cold wind. Can I save Elias, the boy I once knew? She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the Lumanarch light within her. It was faint, fragile, but alive, and somewhere deep inside a spark of hope lingered. The memory of the sun, the dawn, and the boy she had once called friend. And for the first time in 10 years, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could. The quarry had always felt like a safe place. The stone walls rose high on all sides like the ribs of some ancient beast, shielding the camp from the worst of the winds that swept across the broken land. Moss and creeping vines had begun reclaiming the rock, and thin trees leaned inward from the rim above as if they were curious about the lives below. For 4 years, the quarry had been a refuge, a place where the children Rowan once protected had learned to become something more than survivors. But tonight, it felt hollow. Theo was gone. The fire burned low in the center of camp, its embers glowing softly in the dark, while the teenagers sat around it in silence. No one laughed. No one argued over food or told stories like they usually did. The space Theo used to sit in felt painfully obvious. Rowan sat on a flat piece of stone, her hands resting on her knees, watching the flames twist slowly in the wind. Daniel sat beside her, elbows on his thighs, staring at the ground. Micah broke the silence first. He was fine yesterday, he muttered. He was laughing, remember, when Sarah slipped in the mud near the stream? Sarah gave a weak smile that quickly collapsed. Yeah, she whispered. He wouldn't stop teasing me about it. Her voice cracked before she could finish the thought. Across the fire, Lucas rubbed his face with both hands. We should have noticed something, he said quietly. Rowan warned us about the rift, about the whispers. Rowan felt the words like stones dropping in her chest. She lifted her gaze slowly. This wasn't your fault. No one responded. The wind shifted through the quarry and carried the faint smell of damp stone and ash. Daniel finally spoke. You saw what was happening to him, he said softly to Rowan. You tried to help him. Rowan nodded faintly, but it didn't feel like enough. Her mind kept replaying the moment in the cave, the way Theo's body twisted, the fear in his voice, the brief flicker of the boy he used to be before the rift swallowed him. She closed her eyes. He was scared, she murmured. The group fell silent again. For a long time, no one moved. Finally, Sarah whispered something barely audible. I miss Rowan teaching us how to set traps. Rowan blinked in surprise. What? Sarah wiped her nose. When we were little, she said. Back in the quarry the first time, before the house, you made us practice tying knots and building shelters. Theo was terrible at it. A few of the others gave tired chuckles. He kept tying the rope backwards, Micah added. And Rowan kept pretending she didn't notice, Lucas said. Rowan actually smiled faintly. Hey, she said, I noticed. Daniel looked at her. You were patient with us. Rowan shook her head slowly. What? No. I was terrified. They stared at her. I had no idea what I was doing, she continued quietly. I was just a kid trying to keep you all alive. Micah looked around the camp. You did. That simple statement settled heavily in the air. Because they all knew it was true. Without Rowan, they wouldn't have survived the forest. They wouldn't have survived the house. They wouldn't have survived the years that followed. Sarah leaned forward and stirred the fire with a stick. I keep thinking I'm going to hear Theo snoring tonight, she said softly. Lucas nodded. He sounded like a chainsaw. That's because Micah punched him in the ribs that one time, Daniel said. Micah raised his hands defensively. He stole my rabbit. The group actually laughed. It was small, fragile, but it was real. Rowan watched them carefully. These weren't the frightened children she once guided through the woods. They were stronger now, harder, but the grief in their eyes reminded her They were still just teenagers, trying to survive a world that had taken far too much from them. Rowan finally stood. "We'll bury something for him tomorrow." The others looked up. "A marker," she explained gently, "even if there's nothing left to bury. He deserves to be remembered." They all nodded. Daniel added softly, "We'll plant something there." Sarah tilted her head. "A tree?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "Theo liked climbing them." That earned another weak smile from the group. The fire crackled quietly as the night stretched deeper. Eventually, the teenagers drifted toward their sleeping places one by one. But Rowan remained by the fire. Daniel stayed too. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The stars above the quarry were bright tonight. Rowan could feel the faint pulse of the rift miles away in the cave, like a splinter lodged somewhere in the world. And beneath that, something older, something vast. Watching, Daniel finally glanced sideways. "You're blaming yourself." Rowan didn't answer. "You can't save everyone," he continued gently. Rowan sighed. "I know." But knowing didn't make the guilt disappear. She stared into the fading embers. "He was one of the little ones," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I remember." Rowan rubbed her hands together slowly. "I keep thinking about the old days," she admitted, "before everything fell apart." Daniel looked curious. "You mean before the Black Choir?" Rowan nodded. "Before demons, before rifts, before the world broke." She paused. "And before Elias changed." Daniel glanced towards the dark forest beyond the quarry. "You two were close?" he asked. Rowan let out a quiet breath. "We were friends." Her voice softened as memories surfaced. Rowan stared at the stars again. "Sometimes I still see that version of him," she whispered. "The real Elias." Daniel studied her face. "You still believe he's in there somewhere?" Rowan hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. But part of her desperately wanted it to be true. The night deepened around them, and far away, beyond the torn veil of reality, something ancient stirred. In the outer deep, the void stretched forever. A vast ocean of warped stars and collapsing geometries that no mortal mind could truly understand. The god of madness drifted within it, ancient, patient, watching. It had tasted the mind of the boy, Theo. A small offering, a whisper of chaos, but its attention was now drawn elsewhere, to a different soul, a darker one, Elias, the creature once known as a boy. Now a demon king wandering the edges of reality. The mad god reached outward, not through space but through thought itself, through memory, through doubt, through pain. Its voice slid like oil through the darkness of Elias's mind. "She will betray you again." Images surfaced. Rowan standing against him. Rowan sealing the bone gate. Rowan destroying everything he had built. She chose the light. She chose the world. She did not choose you. The mad god did not shout. It whispered, slowly, patiently. You were alone when the darkness came. You were alone when the throne shattered. You were alone in the expanse. The voice faded into the void, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and the god of madness waited, because it knew something simple and eternal. Madness rarely begins with screams. It begins with quiet thoughts, in the dark. Back in the quarry, Rowan finally lay down beside the dying fire. For the first time since returning to the world, she allowed herself to sleep. But the night carried uneasy dreams. Chapter 8. Shadows and Ruptures. The quarry had never felt so exposed. Rowan perched on a jagged rock above the camp, scanning the ruins of their old shelter. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke from the distant rift, curling around her like a living thing. Somewhere beyond the edge of the trees, the world groaned, but it was quiet. too quiet. She didn't know yet that someone was watching. High above the forest canopy, Elias hovered in the shadows, his wings slicing through the night air with a soundless grace. His body was fully demonic now, dark tendrils of energy writhing around him, crimson lightning dancing along his skin. He was magnificent. He was terrifying. And he was lonely. The god of madness whispered in his mind. It did not speak aloud. It did not shout. Its words slithered into his thoughts, poisoning every memory and every sense of reality. She does not care for you, but she never will. The light you thought she wields is weak. She is naive, soft, fragile. She must suffer as you have suffered. Elias clenched his fists. Rage coiled in his chest like a living thing. The world had abandoned him once, and now Rowan, his oldest friend, his companion, the one human who had ever understood him, stood before him laughing, hopeful, full of life. The contrast stabbed him harder than any sword. He watched from above as the teenagers gathered around the campfire, unaware of the predatory presence in the sky. Their laughter, their ease, their trust, they burned in him. The god of madness whispered again. Make her feel loss. Make her bleed. Only then will she understand you. Elias's wings unfurled in a storm of shadows. The rift's faint glow in the distance reflected off his eyes like molten embers. He drew his form high above the clouds, letting the wind carry him, silent and unstoppable. Then, with sudden speed, he plummeted towards Sarah, one of the youngest of the survivors. In a heartbeat, he seized her in his massive hands, her small body helpless against his strength. Rowan's senses flared like a wildfire. Her heart stopped. Lumanarch energy surged within her, raw and unrefined, as though the very essence of her being screamed for action. With a blur of motion, she leapt into the air, radiance spilling from her like a river of liquid light. She cut through the wind, reaching Sarah just as the demon dropped her from hundreds of feet above the jagged earth. Rowan's hands closed around Sarah, catching her with ease. She gently lowered the trembling girl to the ground, whispering reassurances. Sarah clutched her, trembling eyes wide with both terror and awe. Rowan barely had time to glance upward before Elias turned his gaze back to her. He launched himself at her again, wings beating like the drums of war. The sky itself seemed to tremble under the force of his power. Dark energy erupted from him, each movement tearing at the fabric of the world. Rowan rose to meet him, wings of pure Lumanarch light spreading wide, shielding her from the first volley of crimson lightning and searing fireballs. They collided in mid-air. Darkness met light. Pure energy collided with pure energy, sending shockwaves across the land below. Trees bent, boulders cracked, and the air itself seemed to scream. Every strike created tiny rifts, fissures in reality that leaked the raw essence of dark energy into the world. Elias drew strength from these rifts, his demonic power swelling while Rowan struggled to maintain focus. For a time it was evenly matched. Light and shadow streaked across the sky as they darted across the clouds, twisting and looping with impossible agility. Each blow threatened to tear the world open further. Then, Elias tackled her mid-air with a force so immense it drove them into the broken earth below. Rowan screamed as the impact cracked stone and tore soil, creating a massive rift that pulsed with darkness beneath them. From that fissure, the god of madness peered outward, its vast face etched into the void, observing the battle with a terrible curiosity. Elias rained down blow after blow. Each strike twisted Rowan's body, breaking bones, tearing flesh. She was bleeding, broken, exhausted, yet her light flared with every moment, desperate, unyielding, even as the rift beneath them grew. Rowan's vision blurred. Her body felt like it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. And then, through the haze of pain and despair, she looked up at Elias. Her lips barely moved. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Elias. I didn't mean to. I miss the old you. The words pierced through the storm of darkness. Elias froze. For the first time in 10 years, the wall around his heart cracked. A flicker of something he had not felt in a decade. A memory of friendship, of trust, of laughter, shone briefly in his eyes. It scared him. It terrified him. For the first time, the mad god's whispers faltered. He recoiled, stepping back, wings trembling as though the light had burned him. Elias ascended rapidly, vanishing into the clouds, leaving Rowan bloodied and broken on the jagged earth below. Rowan struggled to breathe, her body racked with pain, every bone and muscle screaming. The teenagers rushed to her side. Micah and Daniel carefully lifted her, their hands steady and gentle despite the trembling of their own hearts. Sarah clutched Rowan's arm, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. Rowan whispered faintly, trying to reassure them. I'm okay, just a little tired. They didn't respond. They were crying, hugging her, their hands pressed to her wounds. The quarry felt impossibly quiet around them, except for the wind whistling through the stone walls. Rowan finally closed her eyes, exhaustion claiming her. And for the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself to be carried. Above in the dark clouds, Elias lingered. His heart was uncertain, his rage tempered, his thoughts for once unsteady. Rowan's words, so simple, so human, had thrown him into a storm within his own soul. He could feel the pulse of her light even from afar, even broken, and he didn't know whether to destroy it or fear it. The quarry was bathed in a twilight glow, half-shadows pooling against jagged rock walls and the shattered remnants of old machinery. Rowan lay on a bed of furs and tattered blankets. The teenagers gathered around her, their faces masks of terror, concern, and awe. Even in her broken state, her radiant Lumanarch energy pulsed faintly through her cracked skin, glowing like embers in the dim light. Sarah was the closest, cradling Rowan's hand with a trembling grip, whispering, "You're going to be okay, I know you are." Micah knelt beside her, pressing a wet cloth to one of her many wounds. "We've got you, Rowan. You've got us. You always taught us to survive. Now let us survive with you." Rowan's lips quivered as she opened her eyes, glancing at each of the teenagers in turn. Daniel was sitting slightly apart, silent, but his eyes held a storm of worry and determination. "I'm here," she whispered faintly. "All of you. Thank you." The teenagers cried quietly, a mix of relief and lingering fear at what had just happened. The fight in the sky, the rifts, the crushing blows, the dark energy that had battered her body had been too much. But the mere fact that she was alive, breathing, and looking at them filled their hearts with hope. Far above them, perched on the ragged edge of storm clouds, Elias hovered. His massive wings stirred the wind, casting shadows that drifted like dark tides across the quarry below. His body radiated raw, demonic energy, crimson lightning tracing the contours of his sinewy form. Yet inside, a war raged that no weapon could strike. He clenched his fists, voice a thunderous growl that shook the clouds. "Why does this flicker of light still affect me?" he whispered, almost to himself. The god of madness's voice slithered into his mind, cold and venomous. "You allowed yourself to care for her. You allowed your heart to soften. It is weakness, Elias. Use it. Destroy her, destroy them, let nothing survive." But Elias could not. The brief memory of Rowan's voice, the gentle apology, the sincerity in her words had burned into the shadowed corners of his mind. He remembered the laughter of their past, the times before rage, before betrayal, before he became what he was. "I am not weak," he shouted, snapping his wings and sending a ripple of shadow across the skies. "I am more than you. I am... A flicker of warmth buried beneath centuries of darkness shot through him. Pain, regret, anger, love. The god of madness hissed in his thoughts, frantic. "No, do not feel, do not feel. She is yours to destroy. Let her burn." Elias's body trembled, lightning flashing across his skin. He roared, throwing a massive arc of energy into the clouds, scattering them in a storm of black and red. Even the rifts themselves recoiled from the violent surge, as though reality could sense the battle within him, the demon and the memory of the human he once was. Back on the quarry floor, the teenagers moved cautiously around Rowan, tending to her wounds and doing what they could to ease her pain. The sense of wonder and fear in their eyes was tempered by deep respect and admiration. Even in her weakened state, Rowan's presence commanded them. Micah whispered, brushing dirt from her cheek. "I can't believe it. You really came back. You're here. After 10 years. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it," he said. Rowan smiled weakly, pain twisting her face. "I'm here, but I'm not all of me yet. Elias, he's out there, watching." Daniel knelt near her hand, gripping it tightly. "We'll protect you. We've survived this long without you. We can survive him too. You're not alone, Rowan." Tears rolled down some of the teenagers' faces. They began sharing memories of the years she had been gone, the trials they'd faced, the lessons she had taught them that had kept them alive. Even in the shadows of despair, their voices carried hope. Rowan felt it too, a deep, aching warmth, the connection between them, forged over years of shared hardship. She could feel their trust, their courage, their loyalty, and even in the shadow of Elias's power, it gave her a sliver of strength. Over the next few days, the camp fell into a fragile routine. Rowan, though broken and weak, helped organize the teenagers, teaching them how to forage safely, how to trap small game, and how to maintain watch over the quarry for signs of rifts or Elias's war approach. They moved in careful silence through the remnants of the old forest and ruined town, collecting water, mushrooms, roots, and small animals. The teenagers huddled close when Rowan exerted herself, carrying her when she could not walk, whispering encouragement into her ears. The air was tense, each sound, a snapping branch, the cry of a distant bird, sending the teenagers into heightened alert. Every shadow could be Elias, every gust of wind a sign that the god of madness was at work. Yet, in this tense, precarious survival, moments of laughter and joy still appeared. They shared food, told stories of mischief from their youth, and even teased each other, fragile threads of normalcy weaving into their lives despite the looming threat. Rowan smiled faintly, her strength slowly returning with the energy of their connection. "You've all grown," she said softly, eyes glimmering with pride. "Even without me, you've become strong." And the teenagers felt it. Her light, fragile but unbroken, a reminder that they were not alone and that the fight was not yet lost. High above, Elias observed the camp in silence. His anger churned into confusion as he watched them care for Rowan, the laughter and simple camaraderie striking him in ways he had long forgotten. He could feel the flicker of humanity rising inside him once more, a trembling spark of the boy who had once trusted, loved, and laughed alongside her. The god of madness hissed furiously. "No, you are mine. You will not feel this. You will destroy them all. Your wrath is all that matters." But Elias's claws clenched. He whispered to himself, voice low and dangerous. "No. Maybe there is something more, something I forgot." A thought that made his wings tremble and the rifts above flare dangerously. He did not approach. Not yet. He waited watching, and the storm of his emotions grew. Rage, regret, anger, and something terrifyingly unfamiliar. Doubt. That night the camp was quiet, but tense. Rowan sat by the fire, leaning on Daniel, feeling the warmth of the small flames against her cold, battered body. The teenagers huddled close, listening as she spoke softly about Elias, the cosmic battles she had fought, and the responsibility that lay ahead. Outside the quarry, the wind howled through the broken walls, echoing faint whispers from the rifts high above. But for now, the teenagers slept safe, and Rowan rested, gathering strength for what she knew would come next. And high in the clouds, Elias remained, watching, feeling, struggling. The god of madness seethed in his mind, but he was not yet fully under its sway, and for the first time in a decade, he questioned the darkness inside him. Chapter 9. The Light That Remembers. A week had passed. The quarry had settled into an uneasy rhythm again. The wind carried the smell of wet stone and pine, and the distant forest hummed with insects and birds that had slowly begun to return. Rowan stood near the edge of the quarry rim while watching the horizon. She could stand now. Her wounds, once open, torn and jagged, had sealed themselves into pale silver scars. The Lumanarch light inside her had been quietly knitting bone, muscle and skin back together faster than any human body should have been capable of. She still felt weak, but she could walk unassisted. Daniel approached from behind with a small bundle of gathered herbs. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. Rowan gave him a tired smile. "I'm not alone." Daniel frowned at her slightly. "You feel him too?" Rowan nodded. "He's been here all week, watching, waiting." Elias had not slept. Not once. For 7 days he had wandered the skies and forests surrounding the quarry, his mind tearing itself apart. "I miss the old you." Her words had been like poison, or medicine. He couldn't tell which. They replayed in his mind over and over. A human heart beating inside a demon. Impossible. And yet, every time he remembered her voice, something inside him cracked open just a little wider. The god of madness whispered constantly, "She lies. She weakens you. Destroy her before she destroys you." But Elias could no longer ignore the other voice rising inside him. His own. The boy he once was. The boy Rowan used to sit with during lunch when everyone else avoided him. The boy who had once laughed. The boy who had once hoped. Rowan sensed him before she saw him. The air changed. A cold ripple rolled through the quarry like a silent thunderclap. Daniel stepped back instinctively. The teenagers gathered behind Rowan, gripping bows and knives. Then Elias appeared. He didn't descend like a monster. He simply stepped out of the air itself. His wings folded slowly behind him. His horns curved toward the sky like blackened blades. But his expression was uncertain. Rowan stepped forward. Neither of them spoke at first. Finally, Elias broke the silence. His voice carried the weight of centuries. "Why?" Rowan tilted her head slightly. "Why what?" Elias's eyes burned. "Why did you say those things to me?" The teenagers shifted nervously behind her. Elias's voice cracked with something dangerously close to frustration. "Why do your words affect me?" The question echoed across the quarry walls. Rowan stepped closer. Calm. Steady. "Because they're true." Elias flinched. Rowan's voice softened. "Deep inside you, you're still human." Elias shook his head violently. "No. You're not a little boy anymore," Rowan continued. "You're a man now." Her eyes met his. "A man trapped inside a demon." Elias staggered slightly. Rowan continued gently. "You were forged by hell, manipulated by Malthus, now twisted by the god of madness." Elias grabbed his own head. The voices screamed inside him. "Lies. Lies. Destroy her." His wings spread violently. Reality trembled. But Rowan didn't move. "You're not alone, Elias." That sentence hit him harder than any weapon ever had. Then Rowan did something no one expected. She ran toward him. Elias froze. Before he could react, she wrapped her arms around him. The teenagers gasped. Even Elias went rigid with shock. Her voice was soft against his chest. "You were never alone." His demonic heart stopped. "I'm fighting you," she whispered, "because I know I can save you." Elias slowly looked down at her. Their eyes met. And for the first time in 10 years, He saw the truth. Not fear, not hatred, just honesty. Real, pure, human. A single tear rolled down Elias's face. The moment the tear fell, something changed. The Lumanarch light inside Rowan surged. It burst from her chest like a rising sun. Brilliant white energy flooded into Elias's body. The world exploded with light. Across the sky, the rifts began to close. Reality twisted violently. Trees bent. Mountains shimmered. The teenagers cried out in confusion as the world itself began to warp. The forest howled. Animals screamed. Every living thing on Earth felt it. Light spiraled around Rowan and Elias like a collapsing galaxy. The god of madness shrieked from beyond the rifts. A scream of ancient fury. This world is mine. But the light pushed him back, silenced him, erased him. Reality began to rewind. Rowan and Elias watched the universe unravel. The sky folded inward. The quarry disappeared. The forest reversed its growth. Cities rebuilt themselves in seconds. Then, faster. Sarah falling from the sky, reversing, returning to Elias's hands. Then flying backward into the clouds. The rift shrinking, the battle disappearing. Further back, the burning house rebuilding itself, flames reversing, walls undigesting the dead. The children walking backwards through its doors. Further, the crystal towers collapsing back into the ground. Further, the cosmic battle, the bone gate closing, the black choir screaming in reverse. Alphars fading, Elias's horns shrinking, his wings disappearing. Further, the locker, the words, "Go back to hell," the paint pulling itself back into the spray can. The hallway empty again, everything stopping. Elias blinked. He was standing in a school hallway. No wings, no horns, no power, just a boy again. Students moved through the corridors like nothing had ever happened. Connor's mocking voice echoed from behind him. Elias looked down at his hands. Human. Completely human. His heart raced. He turned and ran down the hallway, past classrooms, past lockers, searching. Then, he saw her. Rowan stood outside the chemistry lab, exactly as she had looked all those years ago. Alive. Unchanged. Unbroken. Elias stopped in the hallway. The look on both their faces told each other that they both remembered everything. Elias knew that with her by his side, he will make the right decisions this time around. And for the first time in 10 years, he smiled. The end.